Hey everyone, sorry I couldn't be with you today. I'm currently out and wasn't able to join, so hopefully this recording will do my project some justice. So my research project is called Concussions, a meta-analysis study of recovery time. Throughout the past several months, I have gathered information spoken to healthcare professionals about concussions. Although some things are different, the majority of what I read and heard is quite similar. The biggest problem about concussions, though, is the fact that it is extremely difficult to measure. I hope to be able to shed some light on this for my meta-analysis, but first, what exactly is a concussion? A concussion is usually described as a traumatic brain injury that impacts function and ability. Concussions usually occur due to a hit, blow, or whiplash to the head region. It is commonly thought that the damage from a concussion occurs on the outside of the brain. However, thanks to enhanced technology and research, we know that a large amount of the damage occurs within the center of the brain, specifically the corpus callosum, which connects both hemispheres of the brain and allows communication between them. This can help explain why memory problems, dizziness, headaches, focus, and light sensitivity are symptoms of a concussion. The way healthcare professionals combat concussions is by using a design protocol. These concussion protocols are different between each school and student. They have to constantly be adjusted and measured, but the steps for the most part remain the same. First, rest and recovery. Second, light aerobic exercise. Third, continued aerobic exercise and start of strength training. Fourth, sport-specific activities. And fifth, full clearance and return to play, which is the ultimate goal. The objective for this study is to determine the recovery time of college and high school athletes while they are in concussion protocol. Along those same lines, I want to know when these student athletes are considered asymptomatic. By comparing the recovery time, I should be able to determine whether college athletes or high school athletes return to play sooner, and if age has a role to play in that. The methods I used were similar to how a normal meta-analysis and systematic review would be processed. I began with the PRISMA guidelines, which help organize the meta-analysis. However, since I was doing a small meta-analysis, I stuck as close to PRISMA guidelines as I possibly could. It helped guide me through this project of putting together a meta-analysis. My next step was the literature search. I immediately used the database found in the uyo.edu library to search Academic Premier, PubMed, and Sport Discus. Using the search bar, I inserted the terms athletes, concussions, and recovery. This brought up 524 results. When limited to full-text articles, it brought that number down to 113 articles. After reviewing and going through these articles, I narrowed it down to 12 that matched what I was looking to study. The data provided was limited and small, but the available data was enough to help provide an R2 correlation coefficient and a Johnson-Niemann line. I was able to use these within the graphs, which you will see in the upcoming slides. As mentioned in the previous slide, the data was limited in these articles and I couldn't find any raw data to work with. I personally emailed the authors of some of these articles to see if I could obtain the raw data from their own individual study, but I did not receive a single response. I was worried that I was missing something, so I then contacted UNLV, since they're local, to see if I could have someone help me with obtaining the raw data, but they were not able to help me either, which was a surprise to me. I eventually came across a professor of mathematics, Dr. Holman, and she was able to help me find a little bit, but not as much raw data as I needed to get the statistical wants that I desired. With this, I was able to obtain an R2 correlation coefficient and a Johnson-Niemann line. The data I had was then graphed and applied. This slide shows the data and information obtained from the articles I used. The test population size ranged from 10 individuals to 335 individuals. The most common cognitive measure that was used was the immediate post-concussion assessment and cognitive testing, also known as IMPACT. This test is an assessment administered online to athletes to determine their baseline score, as well as a comparator of return to play if they are in concussion protocol. The other cognitive measure you see on here is the Graded Symptomatic Checklist, also known as GSC. It is a self-reporting measure for athletes to rate the severity of their symptoms. The average days till asymptomatic is listed as well. It is important to mention that the two cells with the number 43 and number 7 to infinity are outliers based off of much more serious concussions sustained. Some of those athletes were not able to return to asymptomatic before the end of their original designated study. The average age of athletes of each study is listed as well. 4 of these articles did not or were not able to list the specific ages of their athletes. Those studies received a not applicable for their mean population age. The last column you see is the results of all 12 studies concluding that college-aged athletes become asymptomatic sooner than high school students. This graph shows the comparison of average days till asymptomatic to the average athlete age in years. High school athletes in this meta-analysis averaged 15.7 years old with an average of 8.65 days till asymptomatic. College athletes, on the other hand, averaged 19.4 years old with an average of 6.48 days till asymptomatic. College athletes became asymptomatic about 2.17 days faster than high school athletes. This is my favorite graph to put together, as it helps show a little significance between the asymptomatic recovery for both high school and college athletes. Using the data from the Excel sheets shown earlier, I was able to run those numbers through the correlation coefficient formula to obtain an R2 value of 0.2057, which also included the outliers, I must mention. Without the outliers, the R2 value would have been 0.1335. Both of which are not very significant on the scale of -1 to 1, but it does show a slight significance between the days till asymptomatic and the college age in years. Along with using the data, I was able to find the Johnson-Neyman line using the Johnson-Neyman technique. This line you see is the approximate age in which a student athlete obtains asymptomatic success closer to the college athletes compared to the high school athletes. The results of 1,802 high school and college athletes with concussions comes to this. The average number of days till asymptomatic is obtained is about 6.48 for college athletes and 8.65 days for high school athletes. This shows that when compared with college athletes, high school athletes recover about 2.17 days slower. Along those same lines, the crossover age between high school and college athletes of asymptomatic is about 17.8 years old. This means that when a high school athlete is around 17.8 years old, they're more likely to recover more like a college athlete and to obtain asymptomatic success. The significance of this study between asymptomatic success and age is slightly significant, but not enough with an R2 value of 0.1335. This could easily change with more raw data and more research coming to light in the future, but at the moment there is not enough data to call this significant. The road to recovery and asymptomatic can be a long one or a short one. Either way, returning from a concussion is not easy. The ideal way to return to play, also known as RTP, is to go through the full protocol process and not withhold any information while trying to obtain asymptomatic levels again. The issue we struggle with now in sports is the pressure to ignore or not report the concussion. Continuing to play with a concussion can lead to symptomatic return to play and potentially second impact syndrome, which is receiving 2 concussions back to back. This can lead to severe consequences, if not death, if not treated properly. On a bright note, however, many of the articles mention that cognitive recovery is similar in both high school and college athletes. However, it can take longer for the symptoms to go away in high school athletes, hence the 2.17 days longer for high school athletes to become asymptomatic. Even though the cognitive recovery is similar, we still need to be careful about how concussions are handled. As mentioned a few times before, there needs to be more data, more consistent data, so to say. This will come if we are someday able to control how our data is obtained, which might not be possible. Repeated concussions can affect the data of recovery because it takes longer for a reconcussed individual to become asymptomatic again. The severity as well can impact the data. This is due to the longer recovery time and process that it takes to become asymptomatic. Test reliability is also an issue due to the fact that most of these administered tests can be falsified by the athlete. It is more likely for a college athlete to falsify information on a concussion test than a high school student. Studies are currently being done to obtain more information on why this happens, but early conclusions suspect the athlete's desire to remain in the game and pressure from coaches, parents, and peers as potential reasons. Each athlete is different in how they recover from concussion. Recovery can vary based off of age, severity, and comfortability of the individual who is concussed. Although the cognitive recovery is similar, we simply can't ignore that symptomatic recovery with younger athletes because it is a slightly longer process. Encouraging athletes to report a possible concussion they sustain can not only help them recover faster, but can also help them get back on the field at full speed sooner. A concussion is a serious condition, and it isn't something that we should be taking lightly, especially with the younger athletes. My hope is that in the future we'll be able to have more reliable data that can eventually improve the outcomes of these concussed athletes as they try to become 100% asymptomatic. Alright, and these are my references and articles that I used. Thank you.